The mental argument that Allah is one, that's the argument called at-tamanu', as we're going to mention, which means mutual exclusivity. That means one thing cancels out the other. They can't both be existing. If one of them is existing, then the other one, then that one cancels out the other one. That's the meaning of mutual exclusivity, tamanu', or mutually preventive. That's what tamanu' means. Mana'a, to prevent. At-tamanu' means they're both preventing each other. Mutual prevention. The mental argument that Allah is one is that if there were another creator, the world would not have order. However, the world has order, therefore Allah is one. You ever heard the expression, too many cooks in the kitchen? Yeah. This proof is taken from Al-Quran in the saying of Allah, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. Had there been for heavens and earth gods besides Allah, gods other than Allah, they would be in fasad. That means ruin or disorder or chaos. It would be mentally possible for those creators to differ in their decree and in their management of things because God has no obligations. And God must necessarily be powerful, knowledgeable, willing, and choosing. So if there's two gods and both can create anything possible, then it is valid for them to clash, to conflict, because neither is compelled to comply with the other, because God does whatever he wills. فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيدُ, doer of whatever he wills. لَا يُسْأَلُ عَمَّا يَفْعَلُ وَهُمْ يُسْأَلُونَ. He's not questioned about what he does. They are questioned. So God is not compelled to comply with someone else. If they cannot clash, then both are forced to be compliant with the other. And the compelled one who lacks choice cannot be God. Weakness would undoubtedly apply to one or all of them. So supposing that one willed to give life to a body, and the other willed death for that same body at the same time, there are three mental conclusions. One, both of their wills are fulfilled. This leads to an impossibility, though, because one result cannot stand from two opposing effects. Nor can two opposites exist at the same time in the same place. So both of their wills can't be fulfilled. The second option is neither of their wills is executed, and thus they would both be powerless. Then neither of them would be God, then there wouldn't be any God, and then nothing would exist. So that's not valid. The third option then is that one of their wills was not executed and the other's was. Then one of them would be powerless. The creator cannot be powerless because that being powerless is a confirmation of eternal weakness and inability, because the creator is eternal and his attributes are eternal. So if he has a weakness, that would mean that it's an eternal weakness. If he has an inability, it would be an eternal inability. And if there's an eternal inability or disability, and if there's an eternal weakness, there would be something from which he is disabled. So that means that thing would have to be eternal. Eternal inability is impossible because it necessitates something from which one is disabled. So if he's disabled in eternity, then there must be a crippler. He must have a crippler in eternity. So that's impossible. This is called the proof of tamanu', mutual exclusivity. That's what people call it, mutual exclusivity. Out of curiosity here, I want to look up this term really quick here. I'm just going to Google it. Mutual exclusivity here. Mutually exclusive is being related such that each excludes or precludes the other. Also, incompatible means incompatible. Describing two things as mutually exclusive means that they cannot both exist or be true or happen at the same time. So there you go. So this is called the proof of tamanu', mutual exclusivity, meaning that there are two matters and each cancels the other. I have a footnote here. In his book of tafsir, An-Nasafi reversed the aforementioned mental evidence when he said, with very slight alteration to his text, suppose the non-existence of something that could possibly exist. Had neither so-called God been able to bring it into existence, something that could possibly exist, had neither God been able to bring it into existence, then both are weak. And the weak one could not be God. If one were able but not the other, then the other is not God. If both were able to bring it into existence, then they either cooperated, which would make each one in need of the assistance of the other, and thus both would be weak, or not, or else they didn't cooperate, if each one could bring it into existence independently without cooperating. Then if one of them brought it into existence, then either the second one still has the power to bring it into existence, which is impossible because bringing into existence what already exists is impossible, or not. If he does not have the power to bring it into existence, then the first has eradicated the power of the second, and thus he would be weak and subdued under the power of the first, and thus would not be God. So that's the argument of at-tamanu', dalilu tamanu'. It is also an argument to say that had there been two, could one keep something hidden from the other? If not, then his power would be deficient and limited because he doesn't have the power to keep something hidden from the other. If so, if he does have the power to keep something hidden from the other, then the knowledge of the other would be deficient and limited. Whoever has deficient or limited knowledge or power is not God, the Creator. This mental evidence was also said by Mufassir An-Nasafi, we just read his quote, as well as the author of At-Tafsir. It is also an argument to say that either one God is sufficient for the creation and management of the world or not. If one is sufficient, then had there been another, he would be useless and no one would need him. This is deficiency, and the deficient one cannot be God. And if one God is not enough, then it goes back to the previous arguments. All of what we already said, you can go back to those. The intellect dictates that a done matter needs a doer. Thus, for the mind, one doer is sufficient. In fact, necessary, and what is beyond that is not necessary. Yani, any number beyond one is not necessary. Because if there were two, there could have been three. So two is not necessary. If there were three doers, there could have been four. So three is not necessary. One is always necessary for any doing. So the intellect dictates that a done matter needs a doer. Thus, for the mind, one doer is sufficient. in fact necessary, and what is beyond that is not necessary. Confirming more than one implies the validity of an unending number of doers, which is impossible. Because any number you choose other than one is not necessary. So then you could always add another one and it still won't be necessary. But what if you add another one? Then it's still not necessary. So confirming more than one implies the validity, not the necessity, but validity of an unending number of doers. And that is impossible. وَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ.